Compassion has a way of changing lives in ways we cannot always measure at first glance. It is not just a fleeting emotion or a kind gesture offered in passing, but rather a force that can alter the trajectory of another person's existence. When a struggling mother found herself at the lowest point of her day, standing in line at a grocery store, humiliated and broken by circumstances she did not choose, she had no idea that compassion was about to enter her life in the most unexpected way. She stood with her baby in her arms, clutching only the basics she needed for survival: diapers, a can of formula, and a small bag of rice. Even those modest items felt like luxuries she could barely afford. As the cashier rang up the total, her heart sank, realizing she was short. The eyes behind her burned into her back, the impatient sighs grew louder, and the cutting remarks of strangers left invisible wounds on her spirit. She reached for the formula to put it back on the counter, her hand trembling, her chest tight with the pain of choosing between her baby's hunger and her own pride. At that exact moment, a man stepped forward. His presence was quiet but commanding, his voice calm but filled with certainty as he told the cashier not to put anything back. He would take care of it all. The woman turned to look at him, bewildered and hesitant, unsure of why a complete stranger would choose to intervene in such a personal moment of humiliation. But he insisted, not with arrogance, not with pity, but with genuine kindness that seemed to lift the heavy air around her. He was not just offering money to pay for her groceries. He was offering dignity. He was reminding her that her struggles did not make her unworthy of compassion. What the woman did not realize at that moment was that this man's choice to step in came from a place of lived experience. He was not a stranger to hardship. As a child, he too had stood in those very shoes. He had once been hungry, once seen his mother weep at a checkout counter because she could not afford enough food, once watched her make sacrifices that no parent should have to make. And years ago, someone had shown them compassion. Someone had stepped in for his family. That act did not erase the hardship, but it gave them a lifeline, a reminder that kindness still existed in a world that often felt cruel. The man, now a successful CEO, never forgot the way that one stranger's compassion made him believe his family could make it through. Now, years later, he was carrying forward that same torch of kindness. For the young mother, this moment was more than someone paying for her groceries. It was a reminder that she was seen, that she was not invisible, that despite her struggles, she mattered. Compassion, when expressed sincerely, does more than meet a temporary need. It restores faith, it heals wounds, and it creates ripples that last for years. That single act not only fed her child that night, but gave her the courage to keep fighting, the strength to apply for better opportunities, and the hope that tomorrow might hold something brighter. Compassion had taken her from despair to dignity in a matter of minutes. The power of compassion lies not just in what it gives, but in how it transforms both the giver and the receiver. For the CEO, stepping in was not an obligation or a way to show his wealth. It was a chance to honor the kindness that had once saved him. It was his way of closing a circle that had started in his own childhood. For the mother, receiving compassion was not about charity. It was about remembering that she was not alone in the world. In her darkest moment, someone cared enough to act, That memory would live with her long after the groceries were gone. Over time, the effect of that moment deepened. The mother eventually secured a stable job, one that, unbeknownst to her at first, was part of the CEO's company. She worked hard, rebuilt her life, and raised her daughter with love and resilience. And every time she faced a challenge, she remembered the day a stranger had stepped in and reminded her of her worth. Compassion had not solved all her problems, but it had planted a seed of strength that continued to grow. Years later, when her daughter was old enough to understand, she shared the story with her. She told her how a stranger's kindness had changed everything, how it had helped them survive, and how it had given her hope in the moments she was closest to giving up. Her daughter listened wide-eyed, realizing that their life today had been shaped by one simple yet powerful act. And so, the cycle of compassion continued, because once you have been touched by such kindness, it is impossible to keep it to yourself. This is the true power of compassion. It is not limited to the act itself. It travels forward, crossing time, touching generations, and inspiring others to live with grace. One act can change not just a single day, but an entire life. It can help someone rise from despair to hope, from survival to growth. Compassion is contagious. It inspires others to act, to step in when they see someone struggling, to offer help without judgment, and to treat strangers with humanity. In a world that often feels harsh and divided, compassion stands as a bridge. It reminds us that no matter our status, wealth, or background, we all share the same human struggles and the same human need to be seen, understood, and cared for. When the Millionaire CEO chose to step forward for a struggling mother, he was not just paying for groceries. He was affirming a truth we all need: that kindness is powerful, that we are responsible for one another, and that even the smallest acts can have the greatest impact. That is why compassion is not weakness, but strength. It does not diminish the giver, but enriches them. And it gives the receiver more than just relief. It gives them back their belief in humanity. A single act of kindness can become the foundation upon which someone rebuilds their life. And years later, when that person passes on the kindness to another, the original act is reborn, stronger, wider, and more enduring. Compassion, in its purest form, is not about pity or superiority. It is about seeing yourself in another person's pain and choosing to act with love. That is why one man's decision to step in at a grocery store mattered so deeply. It was a choice rooted in empathy, shaped by his own past struggles, and destined to create ripples far beyond that single moment. The struggling mother was given more than groceries that day. She was given hope, dignity, and the courage to believe that her story was not over. And that is the true power of compassion. It transforms lives in ways no one can predict, leaving a legacy that outlives us all. Kindness has a way of moving through the world, like water flowing from one source to another, quietly shaping lives in ways that are often unseen. When someone receives kindness in a moment of despair, it does more than provide immediate relief. It plants a seed inside them, a reminder that goodness still exists. That seed often grows into an urge to pass it forward, to be for someone else what another person once was for them. This is the ripple effect of kindness, where one generous act extends far beyond the moment, reaching people and places the original giver may never know. It is not confined to a transaction or a single encounter. It carries within it the power to heal, inspire, and build a chain of grace that touches countless lives. The young mother in the grocery store, desperate and humiliated, could not have known how deeply her life would be shaped by one man's decision to step forward. For her, it began with groceries she could not afford. But what she carried out of that store was far greater than food. She carried a story of kindness that stayed with her. That story became a lifeline when she struggled, a shield against the judgment of others, and a constant reminder that humanity still had a soft place to land. In that moment, she was a receiver. But receiving such compassion did not end with her. It began to take root within her heart. Every time she looked at her daughter, every time she remembered the stranger who paid without hesitation, she felt a quiet resolve building in her. One day, she would give back. One day, she would pass it forward. That resolve became part of how she lived. Years later, when she had steadier footing and could finally breathe without fear of losing everything, she remembered the man's words. When you're able, pass on this kindness to someone else. She took that instruction as more than advice. She carried it as a mission. Whenever she saw someone struggling, an exhausted mother counting coins at the bus stop, a teenager short of fare, or a coworker quietly skipping lunch, she thought back to that day in the grocery store. She remembered the shame that burned in her cheeks, the tears she had fought to hide, and the relief that washed over her when compassion stepped in. And so, she stepped in too. At first, her acts were small. She would leave an extra sandwich in the office fridge with no note, just in case the coworker, who always claimed not to be hungry, might find it. She would quietly cover the bus fare for the student who looked as lost as she once did. She would leave diapers at the door of the neighbor down the hall who had a newborn and no family nearby. None of these gestures were grand, but each carried a piece of the kindness she had once received. Each time, she felt a sense of fulfillment, not because she wanted recognition, but because she was continuing a story she had been blessed to be part of. What she did not realize was that others were watching. Her daughter, growing up by her side, noticed every act of quiet generosity. She learned from her mother's example that kindness was not optional. It was a way of living. When her daughter saw someone struggling at school, she offered a hand. When a classmate was bullied, she stood up for them. When she grew older and began earning her own money, she saved part of it, not for herself, but to help others. Her heart had been shaped by her mother's compassion, which had first been sparked by the kindness of a stranger years ago. The ripple was continuing. The beauty of kindness is that it rarely stops with the person who receives it. Each act sets into motion countless others. That man in the grocery store, the CEO who chose to step forward, may never have seen the countless lives touched by the young mother he helped. He may never know how many diapers, bus fares, or meals she provided. He may never know how her daughter grew into a woman who lived to serve others. But his one act planted a seed that became a tree. And that tree bore fruit in the lives of people he would never meet. Kindness spreads because it awakens something deeply human within us. When we experience generosity, it strips away the cynicism the world often tries to build. it reminds us of the goodness we long to believe in. And once reminded, we cannot help but want to be part of it. There is a deep satisfaction in knowing that we can be someone else's turning point, just as someone once was for us. That satisfaction fuels the ripple, pushing kindness farther and farther out. Like waves expanding across a still pond after a stone is dropped. The ripple effect of kindness is not limited to acts of charity or grand gestures. Sometimes, it is a word of encouragement spoken at the right time. Sometimes, it is a smile to someone who feels invisible. Sometimes, it is listening when the world has been too loud for a weary soul. Each small act becomes a seed planted, and we cannot always know how deeply it will grow. A kind word can linger in someone's mind for years, surfacing when they need it most. A generous gesture can inspire someone to live their whole life differently. The young mother's story demonstrates this truth. She had been ready to give up hope when she was met with compassion. And that compassion kept her going long enough to rebuild her life. In time, she rebuilt not only her own, but became a source of hope for others. What had begun as a moment of generosity in a grocery store became a cycle of grace touching countless lives. Neighbors, co-workers, strangers, and even her own daughter. The man who once stepped forward had no way of knowing that his choice would echo through so many lives. But that is the nature of kindness. It rarely stops where it begins. What makes the ripple effect so powerful is that it proves no act is ever too small. The man may have had wealth and influence, but it was not his position that created the impact. It was his willingness to see another person struggle and act. The mother may not have had riches to give, but she had empathy, and that empathy guided her to pass it forward in every way she could. Her daughter may not have had much as a student, but she had courage, and she offered it freely to those around her. In each case, the ripple moved forward, reaching someone else, carrying with it the memory of compassion. As the years went on, the mother and her daughter created their own tradition. Every holiday, they would go to a store, watch quietly for someone who seemed to be struggling, and step in. They never told the full story of why they did it. They simply said, "Let us help. One day, you can do the same for someone else." And each time, the ripple grew wider. Each person they helped carried that story with them. And perhaps one day, in their own way, they too would keep it alive. The ripple effect of kindness teaches us that the good we do is never wasted. Even when we cannot see its outcome, it continues moving forward, touching lives in ways we may never know. The young mother's story is proof that one act of compassion can reach far beyond the moment, shaping futures, creating legacies, and reminding us all that kindness is one of the most powerful forces in the world. True generosity does not end when the act is complete. It begins a cycle of grace that can change the course of countless lives, echoing far beyond the moment, and sometimes even beyond our lifetime. And friends, this story is not just about a poor mother or a wealthy CEO. It's about the power of compassion and the ripple effect of kindness that can transform lives. Sometimes the smallest act can become the greatest gift in someone's darkest moment. So today, I encourage you, be the reason someone believes in goodness again. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel, Everyday Grace Stories, for more real, and inspiring stories that remind us of the beauty of humanity. Share this with someone who needs hope today, because you never know whose life you might change with just one click. Until next time, stay kind, stay compassionate, and remember, grace grows when we give it away.